Hello, grade 7. This is Mrs. Lopez. Today we are learning module 2 and lesson 6, distance between two rational numbers. We know the absolute value, we know the distance between 0 and the number on the number line, but now we are trying to find the distance between two different numbers, not just between 0 and a number, but between two different numbers on the number line. Okay, so person A we have here, and we have here person B. What is the distance between -4 and 5? Let's locate -4 on the number line. It's right here. And 5 on the number line is right here. So what is this distance between -4 and 5? I can say -4 is 4 units away from the 0, right? So 4 units. And 5 is 5 units away from the 0. So what is the distance between -4 and 5? That is 4 plus 5 units. So 9 units. Pretty easy, right? So when we talk about the number line, it becomes pretty easy. What is the distance between 5 and -4 in person B? So let's find 5 on the number line. Let's find -4 on the number line. So 5 is 5 units away from 0. -4 is 4 units away from 0. Together, again, it's 9 units. Because now you're going to add 5 and 4, which is the same thing. 5 plus 4 equals 9 units. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. What is the distance between -5 and -3? -5 is right here. -3 is right here. What is the distance between these two? It's just 2 units. Right here. 2 units. Person B, what is the distance between -3 and -5? -3 is right here, -5 is right here, so again, it's 2 units. What is the distance between 7 and -1? So 7 is here, -1 is here. From 0 to -1 is 1 unit. From 0 to 7 is 7 units. 1 plus 7 is 8 units altogether. What is the distance between -1 and 7? Same exact thing, as you probably have noticed already. So together, it'll be 8 units. Okay. So would the order matter when we are looking for distance between 2 points on the number line? No. As we noticed, we changed the order between these numbers, but the distance between these two numbers is the same. Okay. So let's look at exercise 2. What is the distance between 0 and -8? So here we are looking for the absolute value. Distance between 0 and -8 is going to be 8 units. 8 units. What is the distance between -6 and -10? Let's find it. -6 and -10. So we are looking for this distance right here. 1, 2, 3, 4 units. 4 units. What is the distance between -2 and -1.5? So that's where we have rational numbers, our fractions. So where is -1 and 1/2? Remember we talked about how -1 and 1/2 is -1 plus -1/2. So it will not be between 0 and -1. It will be between -1 and -2. -1 and 1/2. Okay, so that's our -1 and 1/2. And -2 is right here. So what will be that distance between -1 and 1/2 and -2? That's going to be just 1/2 unit, wouldn't it? This is our whole unit. This is just half of it. So 1/2 units. 1/2 units. Okay, so far so good. All right. Find the distance between -3 and 2. So our step 1 starts on an endpoint. So any endpoint, -3, right here. Count the number of units from the endpoint you started on and the other endpoint. So the other endpoint is 2. We're counting the number of units. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 units. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 units. And it can be in any direction since the order wouldn't matter. It'll be different direction, any direction. Okay, so now what if we are talking about huge distances? Like remember when we had the airplane at 25,000 feet above the sea level, and the submarine that is -600 feet below sea level. So what if we have numbers like that? Would we still be using the number line? Probably not. It's not that efficient. For that, there is a formula that we are going to use. For two rational numbers, p and q, the distance between p and q is the absolute value of the difference of these two numbers. To make it easier, remember the absolute value, which is always positive, right? And this is the brackets that show the absolute value. And here is the difference between the two numbers. So if I look at our previous examples, 5 and 4, it's -4, right? So I'm going to subtract -4. The difference between 5 and 4 is going to -4 is going to be 9 units, and the absolute value is always positive. So let's take a look at how it works. Okay. Change in elevation versus distance. Distance is positive. Change in elevation or temperature may be positive or negative depending on whether it is increasing or decreasing. A hiker starts hiking at the beginning of a trail at a point which is 200 feet below sea level. So in this sentence, we can just underline 200 feet below sea level. I know that distance is going to be negative because we are talking about below sea level. He hikes to a location on the trail that is 580 feet above sea level and stops for lunch. So again, we have 580 feet above sea level. What is the vertical distance between 200 feet below sea level and 500 feet above sea level? Okay, so now we need to find that distance between these 2 points. Again, we can draw the number line. And that number line is going to be very, very long because these numbers are pretty high. What we want to do, I just want to show you how it's going to look like. So if we have here a sea level, which is a 0, 200 feet below sea level will be somewhere here, -200, and 580 feet above sea level is going to be somewhere here, 580. I see that from 0 to -200, we have 200 units. And from 0 to 580 is 580 units. So what will be the total distance between 580 and -200? I would have to add these two numbers together, wouldn't I? 580 units plus 200 units will give you 780 units. Or, since we are talking about the feet, it's going to be feet instead of units, right? 780 feet. Okay, so that's how it will look on a visual model. But visuals are good, but they're not as efficient. It takes time to draw them. It takes time to make sense out of them. We are going to use the formula. We are going to subtract the two numbers. And again, since the order doesn't matter, it doesn't matter what number will go first. Our formula is the absolute value of the difference of the two numbers. So I will draw the absolute value box, and inside the absolute value box, I'm going to subtract two numbers. I'm subtracting negative 200 and 580. Negative 200 minus 580. From our lessons, we know that we are not working with subtraction anymore. So we will have to change our subtraction problem into an addition problem, where we add the additive inverse instead of subtracting. Okay, so again, we have our absolute value box, and instead of subtraction, we are going to write the addition problem. Negative 200 plus, and we are not going to add 580, but we are going to add negative 580, because that is the additive inverse of 580, right? Okay, so now we have addition problem of two negative numbers. We will add two negative numbers together, and that will give us negative 780 in the absolute value box. Why do we need the absolute value box? Is because absolute value is the distance, and the distance is always positive. So the absolute value of negative 780 will be positive 780 feet. Okay, how would we interpret the vertical distance in the context of the problem? Between between the 2 points, there are 780 feet, right? Okay, or we have from the start of the trail until his stop for lunch is going to be 780 feet. That's what we are going to write probably. There are 780 feet between the start of the trail and the stop for lunch. Okay, moving on. After lunch, the hiker hiked back down the trail from the point of elevation, which is 580 feet above sea level, to the beginning of the trail, which is 200 feet below sea level. What is the vertical distance between 580 feet above sea level and 200 feet below sea level? And that's again, they're showing you how the order doesn't matter. Let's try a different way. Let's try to subtract from 580. So in our formula, we are going to have those absolute value box, and we're now subtracting from 580. 580 minus negative 200. Remember that negative sign, it's very important. Okay, again, we are not working with subtraction, so we need to change it into addition of the opposite. Okay, so now we are going to write 580 plus, instead of minus, additive inverse of negative 200, positive 200. Okay, close the absolute value box, and now we have the absolute value of 780, which is also 780. See how it's the same? It is exactly the same number, and that's why we need that absolute value box, because inside the absolute value box we have one number that was negative, this number is positive, but because we have absolute value, our answer is positive. Okay, so feet. All right, what is the change in elevation? Use the vertical number line to help you. Again, we already did the vertical number line. I drew it for you right here. You can do it yourself. I'm not going to touch it. And we will move on to the next exercise. Okay, use the distance formula to find each answer. So now we are not using the number line, we are using the distance formula, which is subtraction within the absolute value box. Find the distance between -7 and -4. So again, we are drawing absolute value box and we are subtracting -7 and -4. Remember the negative signs. -7 minus -4. Okay? -7 minus -4 will give you -7 plus 4, which is the absolute value of -3. Absolute value of -3 is +3. Find the change in the temperature if the temperature rises from -18 degrees to 15 degrees. We are going to subtract the two numbers, -18 minus 15. Okay, in the absolute value, that is important. We change subtraction into addition of the opposite, -18 plus -15. Inside the absolute value box, still we are going to add these two numbers. -18 plus -15 is -33. The absolute value of -33 is 33. That means the temperature rose 33 degrees from -18 to 15. Okay? Would the temperature be the same if the temperature dropped from -15? The change if the temperature dropped from 15 to -18? Yes. Yes, because the numbers, the order doesn't matter. Because the order doesn't matter. Okay. Find the change in elevation from 140 feet above sea level to 40 feet below sea level. So 140 feet above sea level, 40 feet below sea level. One number is going to be positive, one number is going to be negative. But it doesn't matter because we're using absolute value box. Those numbers do matter when we are writing them. So 140, I'm subtracting negative number, -40 feet below sea level. Okay, so a lot of people make that mistake when they subtract 140 and 40, resulting in the change of 100 degrees. But it's not correct because we are subtracting a negative number. And when we subtract a negative, instead we are going to add positive. 140 plus the opposite of -40 is +40. And that will result in 100 absolute value of 180, which is 180 feet. Okay. All right. That is the end of our lesson 6. Please do your homework. If you need, ask me questions. Otherwise, I will talk to you later.